This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey and I talk about rituals and a little bit about fireworks.
Woo! Don't you remember you told me you Joey, baby? This is what a Joey sounds like. Also, Karen Carpenter. This is what Joey and Karen Carpenter sound like. And this is what an executive producer and the other half of the Carpenters, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. I think I know approximately one Carpenter song, and it's because it was following one of the episodes on Mad Men one time. And I Shazammed it.
Do you remember which song it was?
No.
The Carpenters. My dad, I just remember growing up, my dad loved Karen Carpenter for... it's not she's not a large enough figure, but I think she was beautiful, I think. And it was sort of like a sad story that I think she ultimately died from an eating disorder, I believe. And so it was, the story sort of captured the hearts. She was a darling of, the 70s. Singer-songwriter adult contemporary scene. I don't know what category she falls into. Feels pejorative. Well, with that and the Carpenters, do we have any housekeeping?
No. I mean, you always have
more
in order.
Than
I do. Yeah.
Yes, send us in some topics. We want to hear from you. If you're listening, send us a topic. We want to talk about what you want to talk about. We're out here just
making it up.
making pods for you. We want to hear from you. Oh, I hated the way that sounded.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was disgusting. I take it all back. We're making it for ourselves. It's all for us. Rate, review, subscribe. Our merch store is still up, surprisingly, so you can go buy merch.
One of these days.
One of these days it might close, but maybe it's just doing so much business that there's like, God, this is the gift that keeps on giving. The Critical Nonsense merch store at campfire.com/critical nonsense.
No.
That's wrong.
No, totally wrong.
Bonfire.com?
Nice. Yeah, bonfire.com.
Bonfire. Check out campfire.com/critical nonsense. It could be something good, but also it's bonfire.com.
Campfire.com brings us
/shop/critical nonsense. I don't know.
It's shockingly, we have campfire.com appears to be a search engine, but I'm afraid to use it, so I'm not going to use it.
Got it.
Yep. Joey, do you have a story for us?
Did you read an article?
Did you have you been thinking about something lately quite a bit? And then you read this article and or listened to a show and or
it's exactly that.
Okay, great.
It's exactly all of those things. So, with people thinking about coming back into offices in whatever configuration they're thinking about coming back, and we sort of just in like an extremely hybrid approach last week, like opened back up the office in part-time, optionally to our team. And the idea of rituals has been on my head, like routines and rituals, and sort of like this idea of the repetition, these new patterns, because in the past year, things have been disrupted so much, and everything is going on sort of like, where is the new information? Science is needing to catch up with the day-to-day realities of living in a pandemic. New variants emerge, the alpha, B14, Delta variant, like all of these different things are the story is constantly changing, and so our behaviors as a result of that are being asked to change by public health officials and our jobs, our families, individual communities, different communities are going through different levels of community spread. And so everything is so disrupted. And at the beginning of the pandemic last year, New York was in lockdown. And then we were in, loosen up a little bit, but everyone was sort of shell-shocked in New York. And by June, I started coming back to the office, but I was by myself for largely, maybe once every 10 days, there would be like another person in the office for half a day or something like that. But otherwise, I was by myself. And so all of a sudden, it took a while to get used to and figure out where I was going to sit and get a new desk set up and get new technology and whatever. And now that is being disrupted. And in the same vein, I moved during the pandemic, which also sort of gave me a really new, deep appreciation for simple routines and simple rituals that are like way below sort of your like daily awareness threshold under normal conditions. And I feel like we kind of culturally look down on rituals and habits a little bit. It probably depends on who you're talking to and like what the subject du jour is, but my question for you, Jess, is, hey, what about rituals?
What about rituals? I like the way you call them simple routines, like they're simple machines, like a cantilever, a pulley, a wheel, and yet those are the foundations on which we build stuff and do things. I'm trying to imagine like the simple routines, be they on the surface looking different. Like we talked at the very beginning of the pandemic about replacing your commute with something, right? Because like that itself was a simple routine that was disrupted. And so like now what happens and how do you like mentally shift between those moments? I'm wondering now that you're asking generally about ritual and the daily things that keep us afloat, like what else have you even noticed is starting to move around again, or would you want to be more stable?
Yeah, for me, I think it is like these things that you don't have to think about, at least in sort of like consciously think about them. Something you said made me think about when you're saying like simple machines. Did you ever watch the French Chef's Table season? They did like,
I saw it, but I never saw it. I saw it, but I didn't watch it.
I think it was only like 3 episodes, like specific to France. Mm-hmm. And one of them was, I'm going to butcher his name, but his name is Alain Passard. Alain Passard. I added a little bit of back in here, right in my lower tongue.
Like your Eric repairs, repairs.
Yes,
voice?
Exactly.
Cool.
But he spoke about how he learned to cook, and like, being a French gentleman of a certain age, he was like, like very romantic and like wax poetic about certain things. And he said the whole way that he learned to cook was about knowing movements, right? That I watched my grandmother cook so many times and how she did this thing. And so I knew that movement. And then I learned a new movement. And everything was like this sort of visual kinetic connection of like, this is how you cut. It's, the movement, and then you don't have to think about it anymore, right?
Yeah.
And while I'm not a chef, the way in which you move through your daily environment, like the fluidity and the ease with which you can move through it when you have those like ritualistic routines that you don't have to think about. Like I've always said, I'm a creature of habit, in part because I would rather be thinking about something more interesting, right? Like if I like a sandwich, like I have 2 lunch things if I'm going to order lunch to the office. I'm either going to get like a Spanish sandwich from D'España, or I'm going to get like 2 of the same sushi rolls, and I'll eat that and I'm like good with it. I like the way they taste. I don't have to think a lot about it. Like lunch isn't for thinking. Like for me, lunch isn't for thinking. And so, but in the same way, like doing dishes or like getting dressed in the morning or taking a shower or, like brushing your teeth or shaving or like getting my bike and getting on it and going through the same roads. When I moved, all of those things were disrupted, right? Like I wanted to like cook an egg for Emerson for breakfast. And it's like, where's the spatula? Where do we put the eggs in the fridge? Like I had to think about everything. Like what heat do I need to turn this thing at? And thinking about that now, going back into, we're not going back to where we were before the pandemic. We're going into a new iteration of some hybrid model, and everything is new again. It's got a little bit of the sort of work from home remote. It's got a little bit of being in the office, but it's neither of those things. So it is a third new thing, and everything is disrupted again. And I feel like we just sort of, as a culture, shit on like routine of those like habit loops and those like repetitions because we're sort of always looking for novelty. But like I don't care about novelty I care about like novel ideas and like novel conversations, but like I don't care about like novel like paths to the office, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, tell me more about that part before we talk more about like the good, like the benefits of routine. Like what do you think is the reason for a lot of people, like why I would have said culturally, we're all about self-care and embedding a mindfulness practice into into our days. I mean, certainly not everyone, but a subset of the population. Where does the rejection of ritual come from?
I think there is this, like fetishization of like novelty and experience. And in some ways, like it is just human to seek out novel things, right? Like we are sort of genetically predisposed to like get these massive hits of dopamine when we're experiencing novel things. And so, right, that's why we explore. That's why like our curiosity and all of those things are sort of like emotional motivations to find new things and make sure that you're sort of like getting the most from the environment and understanding your environment. So when situations change, you can compensate for it, right? And I think, but we have it's so funny. Like even the people who use Instagram the most that I know personally, right? This is anecdotal, although you can read lots of articles about it, and I'm sure listen to lots of podcasts of people talking about it. The people who use it the most sort of talk about it the most clear-eyed about how people who are on the platform sharing experiences that they're like going, and that it is this like manicured presentation of self. Like that's not their real life, right? It's not actually what they're experiencing. But we have this like these ideas of like wanderlust. I was joking with you before about the Millennial Rumspringa, which is what I call it. But or the Millennial Rumspringa is like I'm taking 6 months off and going to Southeast Asia to find myself or whatever. I'm going to stop in Vietnam and see if I can.
My cousin just visited me, and for the last like 3 years has been living van life, and it's like seriously, like honestly, the van is incredible. They built it themselves. Like I just toured it yesterday, and like it's full lived in glory. They visited like dozens of national parks in it. It's very impressive, but also it makes me personally, as like not that type of person, it makes me so anxious. I'm just like, oh, it's so unstable.
Yeah, it feels like to me this, like digital nomad life feels like a like conflict potentially between your narrative self and your experiential self, right? This idea of like, what are the stories that you want to tell yourself about yourself that would feel better or more exciting or more aspirational, right? Like, I am a type of person who can just pick up and go anywhere and live in these new places, and I've experienced so much of the world and seen places, and I think those things are like, genuinely beneficial. But on the flip side is, of people who I personally know, again, anecdotal, this is not scientific, who have gone on those sort of like 6-month, 9-month journeys, when they come back, they're like exhausted, right? Like, the experience versus the stories are in conflict. Like, the idea that you have no routines and no rituals from which to like build around as sort of like a baseline scaffolding of your day becomes, I think, emotionally draining. And so it is for most people, not for everyone, right? Like, we have outliers on all ends of the spectrum, and everyone sort of exists in a gradient between like ultimate creature of habit and like complete sort of like hunter-gatherer, nomad of the plains type of lifestyle. But I think that idea of where the romance lies of this story of like spontaneity, exploration, whatever, may genuinely be true. And also, we tend to downplay the sort of habitual nature of things.
Yeah.
And I think like your experience cannot be exciting in sort of like the structure of your day, and also you can have deep satisfaction in how you sort of fill in the structure. But I don't think we sort of think about it that way, at least collectively in America, or at least in the conversations that I'm having. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's probably because it that like the lack of romance, or maybe the opposing romance of novelty, I feel like comes out of just one facet that routine provides, which is around the safety of habit, and like that ritual provides some kind of apparent or sense of security that you can fall back to because you know what it is, and that like familiarity is something that we culturally want to reject. But I guess what I'd argue is there's it like, and maybe what you're arguing too, is to focus on that is not the only thing that ritual can offer. There's also, I guess, the things that come to mind are the first thing that you were talking about. To me, I just call efficiency, which is just like, if you can convert something that typically requires active knowledge into passive knowledge of like an unknown known, like I just know where the spatula is. I don't have to think about it or like actively reach for it. I just know where it is. And so therefore it's just like one less thing to focus on. And I can, instead of picking out what I'm getting for lunch, I can apply that knowledge to something else. So it's like being efficient with your mind space could be like one thing that we don't give ritual enough credit for. Or another thing that comes to mind, and you talked about it in the context, well, you were talking about it, like you were talking about chefs, but I was also thinking just about like sleep and ritual as like a priming tool. Like the whole thing on sleep hygiene is like, can you like get yourself into a state by like creating enough ritual? Like, this is what you do when you're like sleep training babies, is like, can you create enough habit that like you like trick yourself into being into the type of state you want to be in? And like, that feels like a superpower.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's interesting, like, one, we tend to talk about rituals only when we're thinking about like how we want to manipulate ourselves, like you're saying, which I also think is powerful things. And like we should consider it. But like atomic habits or tiny habits, or like these books that have come out and become sort of these waves of like, how can I hack my own life?
Yeah, right.
Like all of a sudden it comes up as a mode of change, which I think is powerful and good. But the question of what about the ones that you already have that are good or providing something for you emotionally in your day.
Yeah.
That we tend not, there was, right, someone will write a listicle like every 6 months about like the surprising habits of super geniuses, right? Like I'm sure if I type it in right now, I'll be able to find like Benjamin
Zillions.
Franklin's daily habits and like Lamarck and
like the whole thing on walking the Flinner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Lamarck went for a walk every day at 3 p.m. exactly, walking hand in hand with Nikola Tesla, where they had their 347 cup of chamomile tea.
And there's chickens in tow. Something.
Yeah, but you find that these people who have had like sort of incredible impacts at different points have a tendency to have like highly ritualized and habitual daily lives because it frees them up, like you were suggesting, to think about other things. And it is like, where are you getting the reward from in your day-to-day? I think is like those people are like extreme outliers, right?
Yes,
like
certainly.
We're not going to be Lamarck or like Marie Curie or whoever.
We're not.
Also French. We're like, why am I only choosing French people on this?
You're on a roll.
Passard, Lamarck, Curie. But similarly, like we tend to turn to it like Atomic Habits and whatever in like those change moments of like, how can you create a new structure?
New things.
I remember in 2009, there was the Uniform project. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
Even by on its face, I think I know somebody who does this.
Yeah, it was like a challenge. Like, I might not be remembering exactly correctly. I think the first time it was done, it was like sort of viral pre-virality, when virality was kind of difficult to come by because the platforms weren't sort of attuned to it.
Yeah.
But a woman named Sheena Mathekin, we'll put the link in here. But the first one, she just had to wear the same dress every day, and she could have like a certain number of accessories or something like that. But it was like, I believe she was a designer, and she just didn't want to think about how she was presenting her like physical appearance every day with that same kind of intensity, and also like a statement on disposability versus sustainability. And so she just wore the same base dress every day and built around it. And it became a way to like be more creative while having to like not put the same level or same kind of investment into her wardrobe. But like that is also like this wild extreme example, right? Like,
well, like yes and no. I feel like when you also think about mentioning like the creative world, the art world, like in a lot of ways, the most prolific artists who just kept studying the same thing from a bunch of different angles are the most memorable. Like if you are the type of person who has a uniform and you always wear the same thing, you become remembered or recognized for that thing because it is very clearly hammered home. So that's yet another thing of ritual and routine is like from the outside world, it can certainly be sticky. And even from your own inside world, it could be about like a fixation with something, let alone just something that's off. Like it could simultaneously be something you never think about or the only thing that you think about.
Right. Like, I mean, there are other like uniformy type of people. I'm putting up scare quotes. Right. Like Steve Jobs is, New Balances and jeans and black turtleneck. I mean, I think the reason he gave was exactly this. Like, I don't want to think about what I'm wearing. I just want to go. And I kind of feel that way. Like, I don't have a particularly extensive.
You're Steve Jobs?
Yes, I'm basically saying I'm Steve Jobs.
What?
Like, I don't want to think about my clothes a lot when I'm getting dressed in this like habit loop sort of routine type of way.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what pants am I wearing? And then I know like I have some shirts that match these pants and some shirts that match these, and like what's clean. Like I'm spending 2 minutes thinking about what I'm wearing just based on like I wore these pants for a week, so I'll wear one of my other like 3 pairs of pants, and that means that I will wear like some like subset of shirts that match this pair of pants. And those shirts are like all of the clothing is like years and years and years old.
Yeah.
Because it's not. And so the question, I guess, of like maybe this whole conversation is really just a meditation about like what do I value?
Yeah.
And then what becomes the relationship with routine in my personal life. But for me, like that idea of sort of corporeal novelty is not particularly like sort of sensorial novelty is not particularly motivating for me. Like for me, I'm like much more interested in like interesting, like surprising ideas or like things I haven't thought about before. And so like all of these other things are like, take it or leave it. Like, I don't care. Like, what do you want for lunch? I don't know. Calories. Like, like.
You're wild. Also, I have no idea if you can hear this, but a sudden downpour has commenced on my end. So I'm sorry if there's a crazy amount of background from me.
It's disrupting your routine.
It's no. My favorite thing.
I was going to walk the dog at 6:07.
No. The sidebar that I always think of ever since learning about it in what I believe is the 10th grade, the pathetic fallacy, which is when you're feeling away and the weather represents that feeling. Like, and then I was sad and then it starts raining. Or like, if you ever seen a cartoon where like the cloud is on top of the little dude, it's like that. And so I was wondering, like, what could this sudden onset of rain be indicating about your disdain for selecting lunch?
It's sunny and hot here because this is a hot take. Everybody should have a boring daily routine. So boring. The more boring, the better.
You know, what I also think, though, that you've pointed out maybe indirectly of, so many different self-help books or things trying to point you to change, is that there's definitely plenty in either the routines, be they many or few, that you already have and the things that they can do for you. Like, Joey, it seems it plays a big role for you to have this like optimizing, efficiency producing role of ritual, creating passive knowledge so you can focus elsewhere. But then also, I don't know, you mentioned another thing that made me think of ritual as like refueling, that you just have embedded into your day, like flossers of the world. Like that moment maybe is a priming tool, but maybe it's just like that's a good thing for you that you've turned into habit, not because it makes you feel comfortable or safe or just because it's consistent, but because taking that time feels good. And now that it's become habit, you protect that time for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting, this sort of ways in which the habits can calcify too, and how like once calcified it can serve that kind of function, like you're
calcifying sounds like it's a negative thing.
It just means like hardens.
Yeah,
that's all I mean.
Sticks, something like that. Just like becomes really in there,
solidifies.
Cemented. There we go.
Yeah, but like, for me, back when we were in the office before, like on a daily basis, I'm a social person. I'm an extrovert, but I had this routine where I would ride my bike in, I would stop at the coffee shop, I'd be listening to something, I would get my coffee, walk back to the office, change. And by the time I had changed, I was ready to talk to everybody and have that thing going. But if I saw someone I knew at the coffee shop before I'd like gone through this full habit, it was really disruptive. Like I genuinely was like, it'd be someone I really like and know well and have like affection for. I'd be like, I don't want to talk to you right now. I want to talk to you in like 8 minutes, approximately 2 blocks from here. And like, then we should talk. And that like,
oh my gosh.
But for me, it was that like, I didn't have a lot of moments by myself. I use this as like a moment where I'm listening to like new ideas, be it a book, a podcast, whatever. But it is like my inside space and I don't make a lot of room for it. And so like as soon as that was disrupted of like this stupid habit where I've already been like listening to something for a half hour, 45 minutes, I'm almost to the end of that period, but I haven't got to the end. And so then I'd be like, oh, I saw one of my good friends at the coffee shop. I'm in a bad mood now, you know? Like,
they just broke the weird. Whole thing. It was propped up so nicely.
Yeah. We're just learning that I'm strange and there's no hope. So, Jess, I think that brings us to Jess's wrap up. Joey is weird corner.
You're great. You're great. And I'm glad you brought this to the limited world of those who listen to this show's attention, because I definitely, at least I feel like I'm in your camp. This idea that like really loving ritual, loving routine is a thing that's under fire, whether we welcome it or not, because it's happening. And there's plenty of good that comes from those things. And so acknowledging that some people might not even be experiencing that good or able to because they've got to shift a thing, or they are expending extra mental energy because they've got spatulas to find, or they might not be in the mental headspace that they're used to because they ran into a person they weren't expecting to see, or the coffee that they usually make at home, now they have to find a new place to pick it up because they know once that settles into a new routine and it's calcified, it'll be great, but they're at the beginning of it. And so it's a whole thing. I guess I don't think you're weird, Joey. I think there's probably a lot of people who resonate with what you're saying, myself included. And all the more reason that if we're going to give a name to this summer, it's got to be like kind to each other summer, or what I forgot what we named it.
If you don't think that's weird, I can tell you that when I open a dishwasher, almost always the first word that goes through my head, unless I loaded the dishwasher myself, is the word heathen. I'm just like,
how could they do
loaded this, you heathens? I tell my wife that. I'm like, I told her the other day, I was like, just so you know, every time I open the dishwasher after you or Kiki has loaded it, I just say heathen. I'm not like angry. I'm not mad at you. And I don't even mean it as an insult. It's just the word goes through my head. Heathens.
But look, let that not speak to us being otherwise closed to change or
very open to change, but also just like efficiency, apparently.
Yeah. Well,
you cannot get many dishes in here like this, you heathen.
Thank you for sharing, Joey.
Pow.
Let's keep it quick, but I have this other thought that I need to run by you, Joey.
Boom.
I passed through the 4th of July seeing only fireworks from my backyard of someone else nearby lighting them and fearing for their lives. And also virtually watching them being set off in Center City, Philadelphia. And it wasn't until that evening when I was scrolling. Sorry if it's so loud. It's really getting quite loud over here. The cacophony of rain has advanced since the last time I commented on it. Okay, so until that night when I was scrolling and I saw a post of a family friend talking about how fireworks have got to go. And it broke down the reasons, meaning, you know, how traumatic they are, in fact, fatal to some animals and wildlife, that they are disruptive to the list, there's like so many different things that are wrong with fireworks, be it labor practices, be it the environmental effects, be it the disruption to people and living beings. And I had never even thought about it other than like, ooh, there's a lot of smoke created from fireworks, but it never really sunk in whether I should be evaluating them in such a way. And so I guess like, when is it time to get rid of fireworks? Is it even time? What do you think about this?
I've been thinking about this a lot because I now live in a neighborhood that has a lot of fireworks. I looked it up because I was like, last year in New York, there was a lot more. And there was like all kinds of conspiracy theories and speculation about, in articles being written at the time and stuff like that about like, where did all these fireworks come from? Did the people who were going to do like the citywide fireworks displays just offload them into the community and just like sell them away? And are the cops giving these away because they're trying to like create chaos in the community because of all the protests happening? I mean, there were articles written about that at the time, but there was an insane number of fireworks in New York last year. And so I was looking it up the other day because there's even more where I moved. And turns out I moved to the zip code with the most 311 calls about fireworks complaints last year. So either I just moved to a complaining neighborhood or I moved to a lot of fireworks. It might be both. But what's been going through my mind is like this idea of culture and like, our fireworks displays are more important in some cultures than other cultures, right? Like I know I don't live in LA. I read a tweet from Moshe Kasher yesterday that said, "Help, I moved into a neighborhood that's been doing fireworks for decades before I got here, and now I need to put a stop to it. Any suggestions?" Being sort of like a sarcastic tweet of like, hey, just suck it up. And honestly, like that had been going through my head all summer already of just like, well, I guess this is part of it. The only part about it that like I hate and don't want to be like a Karen about is like, could we do it like before midnight? Like that would be like super chill.
My
like
God.
it's every night where I am like after midnight, like full mortars. And I'm like, yes, like I agree, like disrupting birds sucks. Yes, I agree, like, triggering folks like veterans with PTSD sucks.
Yeah.
Like the environmental impacts, like I can show you a video, Jess, from outside my window from 9:00 until 5:30 a.m. It was like a coordinated fireworks display in all directions around me at my apartment. And I was like, is the city setting off fireworks like in the middle of the city everywhere? Like this seems really coordinated. Like we went outside and it was just like, it looked like it was foggy because there was so much fireworks smoke. And I don't know, like this idea of, like people's cars are causing way more environmental pollution than these fireworks. They're not good.
Right.
And also like we do other shit that's bad. Like LED lights in street lights are worse for birds than the fireworks are, right? Like they're making birds crash into like buildings in Philadelphia and whatever, right? There was like articles about that that were being written.
That's the critical debate argument, as I've told you before. The debate opponent who use birds are going to crash into skyscrapers as a reason not to build skyscrapers in South Africa or something. It was ridiculous. Okay, please, I digress.
It's just sort of, it is like one of those things where I can see both sides of the argument, right? Like,
yeah,
it is disruptive to me when I'm like trying to sleep and there's like a giant percussive thing happening outside my apartment at like 1:30 on a Tuesday. Like I don't like that. And also like I'm not the center of the universe and everyone doesn't have to adhere to my likings or whatever. And so, it is one of those things of like, how do you balance those things. I don't know. Like, is the ritual of like the ritual of like fireworks within a culture, like, is there?
I'm sorry,
does
I
it have
can't
to be after midnight?
I can't participate in this conversation because it's now hailing here. Just like
so Mother Nature is being disruptive and hitting birds, and we need to cancel her. Like, that's the sort of weird part of this conversation is like we get into these feedback loops culturally now, I think, and fireworks is just like in one of them right now, where the fear is like, we're just going to go so extreme, and then like fireworks are canceled, and like, we're not doing fireworks anymore. And like, fuck, maybe they should be. Like, I don't have enough information on the debate, but like, that's sort of the fears. Like, there are worse things in our lives for birds or for other things. And like, how do you like toe that line of like, hey, like, let's do all things in moderation, and maybe we can get by. I don't know. I don't really have a horse in this race.
No, I know.
I just don't like being woken up in the middle of the night with fireworks, I guess.
You're like, my personal gripe is no, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, readers, listeners, give this a thought. I want to be more informed. So let me know if you send in your fireworks information. And
it's funny that it splits like almost 50-50 though, right? Like our team discussion about it today split straight down the middle. Like exactly 50-50.
I had no idea there was such, I don't know, I kind of just figured like most people were on board with fireworks, but like now I feel like I've opened my eyes and maybe we need to cancel them. So I don't know. We'll see.
No, don't. Whatever we do.
Don't cancel fireworks.
Yeah. Just like.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
Where are we? It was cool. It was cool for an hour when I looked out and it was like going off everywhere in all directions. Like, I was like, this is like a cool thing. And then at 5:30 in the morning, I was like,
you were less excited.
Maybe
you sound so
it's
grumpy.
not that cool.
Also, you should check out, I'll add it to the show notes, this video I watched of a Japanese fireworks festival that I shared also with a company after this poll that we asked. And Alan, one of our colleagues, mentioned how some fireworks shows also supplement with drones and lasers. And he was like, I watched that video and they definitely like supported it with these other things. I was like, well, it's the craziest thing. So you should watch it and keep an eye out for drone and laser fireworks supplements. And who knows, the next frontier of fireworks
that wasn't
may be
a
on its
firework.
way.
That was a hologram. It was Tupac in the sky.
Cool. Okay, we're done.
Tupac in the sky is kind of sweet.
Bye.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Recorded wherever.
It's recorded somewhere.
It's recorded.
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and pyrotechnic friend, Jess Vander.
Thank you, Joey. And thanks to Aaron, who I think will be back next week.
We'd like to thank Alex Contel for being just a glorious person, and our sound engineer, and a Spaniard in a time right when we're recording where it's hard to be a Spaniard because Spain just lost to the Italians. Ugh.
I'm sorry, Alex.
We'd like to thank designer Nora Mestrich for just making everything beautiful.
And also our granules of hail production help. Now I hate it. I'm going back on it. Your fireworks too. Sorry, Gilbert. Les Jacobs and Tony Vong. Thank you so much.
And as always, thanks, Ellen.
Thank you. Special thanks, double thanks to Les, who you listeners may or may not know, but has become part of the full programming team of the show. And he's doing a tremendous job. So
double, triple thanks.
Double, triple thanks to Les.
What I'd like to say is, Les, baby, you're a firework. And also, I'd like to thank Katy Perry. I like to thank the game Hades I've been playing. I feel like I'm learning about Greek mythology in a rogue-like video game. Apparently that's a classification of video games, roguelike.
Oh, I had no idea.
It's basically Gauntlet for the Switch. It's fun.
What is that? Gauntlet?
It was from Nintendo.
Oh,
it was
another game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Legitimately from before you were born.
Cool. Thanks. Ryan played Hades and then described the game to me, which is where you keep basically getting reset to the beginning. And I was like, wow, that sounds Sisyphean. He's like, yeah, totally it is, because that's literally the whole point. And I was like, sounds super
Sisyphus
fun.
is in it.
Yes, sounds fun. But it actually apparently does sound fun. So that's cool.
Yeah, there you go. I've been playing it.
Special thanks.
Also, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It seems like your special thanks is more important. So, so you go right ahead.
Special thanks to making D&D references in meetings. Today I said someone wasn't rolling high on a charisma check, and
no one laughed.
Everyone looked at me and was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I was like, don't worry about it. It's cool. You wouldn't get it.
No big deal. You got a 1. Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow, that was better. I was just gonna thank Animal Crossing, but that's cool. It's not even as fun as that. I'm really glad you can entertain yourself with such things. I feel like you could also pass it off in a way that I may not be able to do. Or that's not true. Even on this show, I make references that aren't funny. Okay.
Special thanks to Jess's sense of humor. This is our gratitude corner. This is legitimately a ritual about gratitude.
True.
That adds things to our life.
Wow.
If you've made it to the end, do some special thanks. Maybe that's good for you.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Special thanks to you for making it to these words, and goodbye. We love you.
Alex. I happen to be in a glass. You can't hear it. It's so loud here. Okay, I'll just mute myself.